I did it! Within the actual month of September, too! Within the actual days of the arc taking place! For my patrons! I'm not good at this. Welcome back to the long-awaited return of the Persona 5 review series, now properly lining up with the actual dates of the game. How long can I keep this up for? Who knows? Let's find out. First off, real quick, I'm recording this as I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, and my nose is a little stuffy, so if I sound off, that's why. Anyway, last time we left off, we were making plans to help ease Futaba back into the world and overcome her anxiety and agoraphobia. But before we get into that, I want to do a quick confidant update. In the first half of this arc, I was able to hit rank 7 and 8 with Kawakami, rank 6 with Akechi, rank 5 with Maruki, initiate a confidant with Futaba, finally initiate a confidant with Chihaya after completing a mission in Mementos, and initiate the final confidant in Persona 5, Shinya Oda. I will not be spending any time with him. Getting back to the story, for the most part, the Futaba recovery plan is a bunch of disconnected gags with various members of the Phantom Thieves. I don't really have much to say about them, they're fun and inoffensive. However, they all culminate in one of the more memorable segments in Persona 5, the beach trip. Hey, remember 6 years ago when everyone was calling any attractive woman thick with 3 C's? Here's on stick figure ass. Personally, I think a bikini for Futaba this early in her recovery is a bit much and is a little bit of a jump, but I do think there might have been some intentional symbolic meaning behind the decision. So long as you're willing to subscribe to the Power Girl school of the boob window is a metaphor that some use to justify any and all anime fan service. As the day goes on, fun times are had by the boys and girls. New in-engine cutscenes are added that honestly do add a lot to the overall sequence, though it does stick out a little in the overall flow. The Persona tradition of the grown-worthy Operation Babe Hunt happens, but thankfully it isn't that bad when compared to past entries. At least until the gay stereotypes show back up and we get reminded of that awful scene. Oh hey, I think I saw a video like this scene once. Porn! Towards the end of the day, Futaba finally opens up, fully revealing everything about her mother, how she knew of the existence of the metaverse and why she did everything she did. The gang starts to theorize that the black mask person going around causing mental shutdowns likely did the same to Wakaba, turning her suicide attempt into a shutdown that had her fall right into a car's path. In the end, Futaba properly asks to join the Phantom Thieves in the hopes that she can learn why her mother was killed, as well as put a stop to the person causing the shutdowns. The good news is, she already was a member. During this, Ryuji and Morgana get into a spat. The latter interprets a comment from Ryuji as him claiming he's dead weight, with the former responding to an upset Morgana by saying Futaba was more useful in the Medjed case. That night, Morgana has a nightmare of him being created in Mementos. He wakes up, worried about his existence, and wondering if he even belongs in the Phantom Thieves. Over the following days, a few things of a note happen. First is a new Kasumi scene. Her performance during the last gymnastics meet weren't great, and the school is rumored to be dropping any honor student who isn't making the school look good in the wake of the Kamoshida controversy. The more important development, however, is the explosion in popularity of the Phantom Thieves following the takedown of Medjed. People are becoming fans and are getting more and more involved with the fan site, to the point that bootleg merchandise is being made to profit off them. Mishima even adds new features to the website, like having people vote for who to get a change of heart. And it's moments like these that I kinda wish I was doing Mishima's confidant. I did it back during my first playthrough with the vanilla game, and his story ties into this part very well. The idea of people voting on whose heart to change is also really interesting. These polls assume that those you vote for are worth a change of heart. This despite the fact that it is entirely based on nominations. The people voting are not victims of the person nominated, turning it into a type of mob mentality. Someone says this person is bad, so everyone jumps on them and demands the Phantom Thieves do something about it. Hell, Akechi ends up at number 1 for no reason other than he talked about how he didn't like the Phantom Thieves once. People turn it into a game while not understanding the actual weight behind what it means for the Phantom Thieves to change someone's heart, Then when they don't immediately do what the people want, they start to get angry and frustrated at them. It's not exactly time yet to analyze this part of the story, so for now, I'll just say this was the part that stayed with me the longest after my initial playthrough. Look, it's her! Wanting to investigate the mysterious metaverse user, the team hacks into Sai's computer to research any potential leads. When Futaba is praised for her computer capabilities, Morgana downplays it by saying it's not a big deal, comparing his car transformation to it. Ryuji tells him to cut it out, and An says he's fine the way he is, that he's cheeky cute, much to his deflation. It's gonna take Futaba a while to analyze the data, so in the meantime, everyone is going on school vacation. Next stop, Hawaii. Overall, I don't really have a ton to say about the Hawaii trip. It's mostly just the gang hanging out with a tiny bit of setup for the next arc. There are some fun moments and a really great scene where An and Ryuji stay in our room for the night. It's a nice moment to let the original trio decompress and reflect a bit while feeling like friends. They're just so comfortable and trusting of each other that they're willing to spend the night together, especially An. After Kamoshida, I wouldn't blame her for not feeling comfortable enough to sleep over with a bunch of guys, yet there isn't any feeling of worry or hesitation. It feels like a really subtle instance of character development, one most people probably wouldn't even think about when it happens. One complaint many had with the original release was that the Phantom Thieves didn't feel like friends, and frankly, I never really agreed with that. Hey look, these girls know how to say Takamaki correctly.
Takamaki-san.
Now I could just repeat the joke about Haru showing up, but for once we actually get something that matters. That being, we become aware of her existence. During the field trip, a few scenes are added in Royal, mainly ones tying in with Maruki and Kasumi. The first scene has Maruki walking into Leblanc where he meets Sojiro and Futaba. At first, the situation looks to end the way it normally would, with Futaba running away. But things change when she realizes Maruki is studying cognitive science, leading to the pair bonding over it. One thing I want to note, Sojiro feels weirdly written in this scene. First, he's really aggressive towards Maruki over the cognitive science stuff, going as far as to threaten to throw him out. Yet later, he acts as though none of that happened, and instead he apologizes for Futaba? I don't know, it just feels like he went from one extreme to the other. Similarly, the Kasumi scene has her finally meeting other people in the friend group, followed by her reflecting on her less than stellar performance during the swim meet. Why did I write swim meet? That's not what Kasumi does. The last thing of note during the Hawaii trip is a scene with Morgana being all moody and feeling purposeless back home. Futaba only half notices since she's working, but Morgana refuses to tell her anything anyway. She plays around with his fur, questioning him about whether or not he's sure about being a human. Principal Eggman fucking dies. Students start to suspect the thieves killed him, with some saying that if they did do it, then clearly it was justified. The gang struggles to react, debating whether they should do anything about everything that's going on. Sai reveals that Eggman died on the way to the police station, and that while it may have seemed like a suicide, she believes the Phantom Thieves might have caused a mental shutdown that led to his death. Prior to this, we were shown him being pressured to find the Phantom Thieves by someone, probably by this SIU director guy who calls for his death in another scene. Side note, the SIU director is like the worst character in the game. He exists exclusively to exposit, and it's just kind of awful. He's only ever in his office, talking to himself or someone on the phone, scheming and doing evil. I would not be surprised that if you removed his scenes from the game, you would actually lose nothing. After reviewing the data from Sai's files, we find a case about how the Okumura Foods Company, owner of the Big Bang Burger fast food chain, has been benefiting from the executives at rival companies experiencing what is akin to mental shutdowns or changes of heart. Coincidentally, the CEO, Kunikazu Okumura, is currently at the top of the fan site polls, making the thieves hesitant about whether they should obey the will of the people or whether he's even evil. All of this is interrupted when Morgana blows up, calling everyone in the room cowards and saying he can handle everything himself. Morgana quits the Phantom Thieves and announces his plans to take on Okumura himself. This is so fucking forced. Morgana feeling like he no longer has a place makes sense. Him feuding with Ryuji makes sense. Him deciding to quit the Phantom Thieves over all this, while also being incredibly spiteful towards everyone, is a complete overreaction. Literally everyone else in the party has been nothing but nice and supportive. What Ryuji and Futaba said was unfairly cold and completely lacking in tact. But for Morgana to take it out on everyone and quit is stupid. I understand the real reason why Morgana is doing all of this, but the game is jumping to an extreme while not giving enough justification to do so. To me, these are not enough to warrant this response. It didn't feel like the game was properly building toward this spiteful blow-up. It needed more time to cook. They only ever gave us short little moments where he feels demotivated and lacking in purpose. A few scenes where Ryuji says something mean, where An infantilizes him, and Futaba asks an unintentionally hurtful question. Not only that, but some of these comments almost feel out of character. This scene is arguably one of the most infamous in the fandom, and I understand why. I get what the game is going for, and I'm not even against the concept. However, I don't think it put in enough work to warrant the level of spite Morgana gives off. This scene is then followed up with one of the most annoying sequences in the game, with you being forced to do nothing but go to sleep and watch cutscenes of the gang dealing with Morgana's absence. Worried that Morgana might have gone into Okumura's palace, the gang heads inside to see if they can find him. Akechi inadvertently tags along. While exploring the palace, we find evidence of Okumura's corruption, further solidifying the need to target him. We eventually come across a door we can't open and are then met by Morgana and her. They've teamed up, and Morgana acts like he doesn't need us anymore despite her blatant incompetence. She opens the door, only to be chased out of the palace by a ton of enemies. The next day, the gang identifies her as Haru Okumura, the daughter of our new target. Confronting her, she berates us, clearly just repeating everything Morgana has told her we did. Waiting for Morgana and Haru at Mementos, Ryuji fucks up and forces this conflict to continue, resulting in a chase sequence that I actually kinda like. We never get to run around Mementos on foot, so it's kinda cool, I like it. Back in the real world, Haru is cornered by an abusive man who accuses her of cheating. He claims to be her fiancé and threatens to tell her dad about this, revealing that Haru is being married off to the son of a politician as a form of bargaining chip. Also, Okumura can gain a foothold in the world of politics. The fiancé tries to rape Haru, Morgana gets punted against a wall trying to stop it, tons of people cheer, I make a video talking about how I think that's kinda weird, it gets posted to the Persona 5 subreddit where people get upset, and we chase the fiancé off. Back at Leblanc, Haru finally forces Morgana to open up to everyone. He admits that he's worried that if he has no place in the Phantom Thieves, he won't have anywhere else to go, and as a result, he lashed out in fear. Everyone makes up, and we all go home, ending the most tiring mini-arc in the game. The next day, Haru learns that she'll be forced to move in with her fiancé on October 10th. She asks us for help to change her father's heart before then, and for her to join the Phantom Thieves. So normally this would be the part where I do a kind of deep dive into some specific topic of P5. The combat, the presentation, the music, the OPs, etc. However, this time I'm going to be swapping the order around some. This time I'll be covering the palace first and the deep dive will come after. It'll make sense later on, you'll see. For years, I have heard horror stories about Okumura's palace, and frankly, I couldn't relate to them, not because I disagreed, but because I quite literally remembered basically nothing about the palace. I remember there was the one puzzle that had you flying through space and flipping switches to open and close airlocks, but beyond that, I remembered nothing. Hell, for the first half of the dungeon, part of me was wondering whether they removed that puzzle or I just hadn't gotten to it yet. Nothing rang a bell, so I might as well have been coming into this palace as if I was playing it for the first time ever. And what did I think? This is the worst palace in the game? Really? I mean, I think the factory part is kind of bland, and jumping onto these bridges you make out of the automated arms is super clunky and awkward, but ultimately it's just like, fine. In terms of aesthetics, I think it might actually be one of my favorites. Sci-fi is one of my favorite genres, so all this high-tech space stuff is super cool to look at. In the beginning, everything looks so slick and clean with lots of whites, grays, and blues. Shapes are just everywhere, which feels like a weird thing to say, but it's true. The windows are triangular, every panel on the floor has a hexagon or comes together to make a square. There's this upside down eject button on the wall. Big Bang cubes are littered everywhere, and I can only assume they got burgers in them. The middle factory section is where the game starts to lose me, with the colors getting swapped out for bland and uninteresting browns and reds. There's still some semblance of sci-fi in the designs of those mechanical arms and the conveyor belts, but it's not really enough to keep me interested. However, I am brought back in the last third with a proper return to just pure sci-fi. This last section honestly reminds me a lot of Final Rush, you know, the final stage in the hero story of Sonic Adventure 2. Flying through space from one section of the space station to the next. There's a reason this was the only thing I remembered from my initial playthrough 6 years ago. Another thing I like about the palace is how combat encounters are better tailored around the story and themes of the palace. For instance, a good number of shadows are weak to wind and Psy, making Morgana and Haru really good characters to bring into battle, emphasizing Haru's importance to this palace in specific, and proving Morgana does have a valuable role on the team. The boss fight against Melchizedek. This fight employs the use of the hunger status ailment, which it's a food company. Yeah, this makes complete sense. The puzzles can range from fine to a little tedious. Trying to figure out which of these robots holds the key to the next area offers some fun commentary on corporate bureaucracy. Rushing to get across these presses before they come back from their 30-second lunch break can be a little tedious with having to run back and forth. And the previously mentioned airlock puzzle is pretty memorable, if a little confusing. Yeah, I don't know what to say here, really. I think Okumura's palace is fine. Now to stop acting like I don't know what happened here and to reveal that this month's deep dive is all about the changes made to Okumura's palace. So what exactly happened in the 3-year gap between the OG P5 and its enhanced re-release? Well, for starters... Whoa! It's Ozziak from youtube.com/@Ozzy.
Okumura.
Ozzy, do you want me to plug your channel or not?
Okumura.
Are you okay, buddy?
Okumura.
How do you say this name?
Mr. Miggs Kumura.
Fine, you do this. I'm gonna go read the new Sonic comic. Sonic comic.
Out of all the palaces in Royal, Okumura's was given the biggest overhaul to several aspects of it. From the addition of new objects to hide behind to the full retooling of a major puzzle. In the first third of the palace, you'll quickly find yourself unable to continue until you locate the general manager's ID card, allowing you to open up some locked doors. To accomplish this in the original P5, you had to trudge through a long, winding labyrinth of corridors and doors that could only be opened with the ID cards of the assistant and division managers. And to figure out which robot is the manager, you'll need to eavesdrop on the low-level worker droids as they talk about their boss, followed by you talking to one of 2 potential targets and asking them questions to determine if they're the manager. They have you memorize details such as how the boss talks and whether they like chocolate, because, I don't know, I guess the writers wanted something silly for the players to take note of. But once you find the right guy, you jump into combat, kick their metal teeth in, and that gives you the card. If you ask the wrong questions, however, they'll simply just lose their patience and attack you anyhow, potentially wasting your time if they don't have the ID you're looking for. Admittedly, it's just kinda tedious and feels like busy work for the sake of making the palace take longer. However, in Royal, this entire section has been wholly streamlined and shortened. Rather than dealing with those long, winding corridors, it's basically now just 2 hallways and some rooms off the side. Rather than having to ask questions that could result in needless fights, you can instead trick the robots into revealing the weaknesses of their superiors, as well as identifying information like how they treat their employees and how they talk to them. It actually doubles down on the commentary of corporate bureaucracy as opposed to including quirky little jokes about imaginary robots liking candy. It also helps build the idea that Okumura is fully aware of the toxic, abusive work environment which he's fostered within his company, and how he doesn't really care because he'll just be abandoning it all anyhow once he makes the jump into politics. The changes made to Okumura's palace are massive improvements across the board, and turn what was the most despised palace in the game into one of the better ones.
Are you done?
Okumura.
I'm gonna take that as a yes and just move on to the boss fight.
Okumura.
Okay, fine, we can both talk about it. So, we send the calling card and rush back into Okumura's space station. Once in the treasure room, the treasure is transported to the spaceship off in the distance, the final result of this Project Utopia plan we've been seeing worked on throughout the entire dungeon.
Another change made to Okumura's palace is the secret inclusion of this game's best grappling hook spot. Normally at this point, you'd have to rush through the final area of the palace, fighting or avoiding a bunch of shadows along the way as your security meter is maxed out. and all while on a timer just to add to the franticness of the situation. However, around the halfway point, you can actually turn back through the door you came through, leading to some stairs that take you to a chest. But next to this chest, you'll find a grappling hook point, and as you activate it, you get to watch Joker swing through the giant bay doors as they slam shut behind him, taking you straight to the Shadow Okumura boss fight and nullifying the entire second half of the sequence. It may easily be the coolest grappling hook cutscene in the entire game, and it's just a really cool shortcut for those willing to explore.
The Shadow Okumura fight in Vanilla P5 is actually really boring. Rather than Okumura fighting you himself, he sends out 6 waves of robo-grunts, all while debuffing you and inflicting hunger. Every wave is pretty easy to beat, with the only notable attacks being Selfless Devotion, a heavy almighty attack that deals damage to your whole party. This move is telegraphed by Okumura's Sacrifice Order, giving you plenty of time to prepare for the hit or defeat the enemy that's gonna explode. Then you slap Okumura with a feather and he's dead. It's incredibly basic and incredibly boring. Oh, and there's this timer that's such a non-factor, I genuinely forgot to mention it and had to go back and add this to the script. In Royal, this fight was reworked to the point that, while some people might not hate the palace anymore, they still dread the story arc because Shadow Okumura is now the most despised boss fight in the entire game.
On the surface, Okumura's fight seems to be the exact same, with the only addition being an added cognitive Haru that stands next to her father. He still uses debuffs like Marakunda and Dekaja, but he can now cast Rakukaja, raising the defense of one of his goons, and making them harder to defeat. However, it's not just the skill list that's changed. The way this fight is structured has also been altered. He still sends out wave after wave of enemies to fight in his place, but now you have exactly 2 turns to defeat them all before that wave resets. Okumura's Sacrifice Order and the subsequent Selfless Devotion makes this even more urgent, as the reset always happens after the move goes off. Once you make it to the single big guy after that though, you won't have to worry about any more resets or sacrificial explosions. Instead, you'll have to deal with the Big Bang Challenge, which returns from the original P5. Good news though is that if your party members are still hungry from the previous waves, the Big Bang Challenge will actually instead be drained and the hunger status cured. In the original release, you'd essentially be done with the fight once you take the big boy out. Instead, however, a brand new phase of the fight is added in the form of Cognitive Haru, being sent out to die by your father's command, and transforming into an admittedly pretty snazzy robot form. The only threat she poses is another Selfless Devotion, so as long as you can tank it or destroy her before it goes off, you'll be done with the fight.
On paper, this doesn't sound all that bad. It's a lot, absolutely, but I wouldn't think it would be that much to deal with.
No! 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 Get up! Joker! Joker!
This is, without a doubt, the hardest fight in the game up to this point, and easily the biggest difficulty spike I can think of in maybe any modern Atlas game. I can absolutely understand why this fight is so infamous among the fandom, and frankly, I was right about to cross the line into thinking this fight was genuinely bad. However, after sitting down with Ozzy here, who helped me through it, I've come to realize the problem isn't poor design. In fact, I can see a lot of the logic in this fight, and I find it fairly admirable. The problem isn't a matter of design, but rather it's a problem of placement. This fight should not have been placed where it is. This is too big of a difficulty spike, and all of the fights leading up to it do not prepare you to deal with it. Up to this point, P5 has had a fairly smooth difficulty curve. Everything feels like the appropriate difficulty for its placement. Except for Cognitive Wakaba, but we'll actually get to that in a minute. Shadow Okumura is a massive step up, and frankly can come off less like a standard boss fight and more like a puzzle to be solved. The level of strategy and planning required is so much greater than it was before, and while I'm glad they were able to turn the fight into something way more memorable, complete with some creative symbolism in the form of Shadow Haru, I just do not think this is where this fight should have been placed.
Fun fact, the reason why Cognitive Wakaba was such a non-fight in Royal is because they felt they needed to, and I'm paraphrasing here, balance out the game's difficulty due to how much harder they'd made Okumura.
That's not how you should have balanced this fight, Atlas!
Another actual fun fact, Shadow Okumura's demon name is listed as Mammon, one of the 7 princes of hell who is representative of the sin of greed. In John Milton's epic Paradise Lost, he was depicted as looking downward at heaven's golden pavement as opposed to God. He would eventually join Lucifer in the rebellion against God before eventually being sentenced to hell. That last note will sound especially fitting in a second.
Hey, that was my line. Oh, whatever. We beat Shadow Okumura, we book it out of there before the collapse, and his treasure is revealed to be a toy spaceship he never got as a kid. Oh hey, who's this guy walking up? While we wait around for Okumura's change of heart, I actually got a lot done in terms of the social sim stuff. And I mean it, I got a lot done. In terms of confidants, Caroline Justine ranks 6 and 7, Futaba ranks 2, 3, 4, and 5, Maruki ranks 6, 7, 8, and 9, Kawakami I maxed out, leaving me with a ton more free time, Takemi ranks 6 and 7, Makoto ranks 6 and 7, An ranks 7, and normally I don't bring up my social stats, but seeing as I maxed out 4 of the 5, I felt the need to make mention of them. Hey guys, I didn't forget to talk about the Kasumi stuff. It's just on a different tape. Give me a minute. Okay, there. During this time period, Kasumi and Maruki are brought into a meeting with a teacher, who all but threatens to take away that pesky honor roll status if Kasumi doesn't do better in the next meet. Later on, Morgana and Joker head to the stadium in Odaiba to return a charm Kasumi dropped, only for the meta-nav to kick in on her phone and drag all three into a palace. We don't really get to explore this place all that much while we look for Kasumi, but much like Okumura's palace, I love the clean sci-fi look of everything. It's really artsy, it looks cool. We eventually come across Kasumi, and a girl who looks and sounds like Kasumi but with her hair down, that gets killed by a shadow. We start hearing voices that all talk poorly of her, leading to her rejecting the insults and pressure placed on her and awakening to her persona in a Sailor Moon style transformation. This is probably the best persona awakening in the game, if only because it's so unique and visually creative. Honestly, I can't help but compare it to Haru's awakening earlier this month, which I'd skipped over so I could compare it here. While I could go into a lot of the nuance, I think you already know why Kasumi's awakening is the best in the game while Haru's is the weakest. Screen time. Kasumi had the most build up to her awakening out of any character in the game. We became intimately familiar with her goals, motives, and struggles, thus making this moment incredibly emotionally satisfying as we finally see her reject the abuse she's faced from the system and society. It's made even more rewarding by the fact that, again, it is the most unique and visually creative scene of its kind, making the literal months of story feel all the more worth it, even if it does stick out from the main plot. Haru, meanwhile, exists within this awkward half-step. While we do see her awaken to her persona, she already awoke to her rebellious nature off-screen much earlier, assumedly when she first rescued Morgana. To be fair, it is established that she's not at her full power, and is shown to be a total amateur, but it still ends up neutering what is the emotional climax of her arc. As stated before, her lack of screen time also harms this. Seeing as Morgana is the focus for the majority of the month, Haru had little screen time to actually establish her goals, motives, and struggles. While other characters get weeks or even months to inform and create the foundation for their awakening, Haru is given days. Then after this moment, she ends up becoming victim to the often criticized aspect of modern Persona, where the characters stop developing within the main plot, leaving any and all development to confidants. That's getting into a whole nother can of worms though, so I'm just gonna go back to Kasumi. After we beat up the Shadow, we evacuate the palace with a tired Kasumi. Sadly, we can't see who owns this palace because the new content comes after the ending of the base game. I'm sure we won't tell anyone in the Phantom Thieves this palace exists until then. We also offer her to join the Phantom Thieves, and she rejects it because she wants to focus on her gymnastics, and because the new content comes after the ending of the base game. A few weeks of Haru constantly freaking out over her dad later, the day finally comes where Okumura holds a press conference. To celebrate, we all decide to go to the world of Shin Megami Tensei 1, where they sadly still don't have any Demon Mickeys or Demon Donalds. Instead, we'll just have to settle for Okumura dying on live television. What? The Phantom Thieves start to panic. They just killed someone on live television, and now Sai and her investigation just got a whole lot more support from the police. And it's on this note we'll be leaving off for now. The month of September is infamous within the fandom for being the weakest part of the game in practically all facets. Narrative, dungeon, boss, character, the day-to-day, everything. For me, my view of the month is a little complicated. Story and character-wise, I think this is without a doubt the weakest arc in the entire game, and it's almost entirely due to what they tried to do with Morgana. While the idea of losing your place within a friend group is a totally valid character arc for someone to go through, the level to which Morgana blows up is not properly built up to or justified. The only person he should have any vitriol towards should be Ryuji, yet he acts as though everyone treated him this way. People can act irrational and stupid. I've had moments where I ended up taking out my frustrations on people who showed me nothing but kindness. Characters in fiction do not have to be perfect, but what you do need to do is build up to these moments in a way that flows well for the consumer. If we were to make a chart with the blow-up we got being a 10, then I would say this story was only able to justify a level 5 or a 6. In other words, what we got was a level 6 build-up with a massive spike towards a 10 at the very last second, much like the difficulty spike that is Shadow Okumura's boss fight. And of course, we shouldn't forget how this ended up affecting Haru and Okumura's writing. Seeing as Haru is a main character, the game still puts some effort into building up her character and showing us what her story is. Her father, on the other hand, is incredibly rushed and ends up feeling like they forgot to do something with him on screen and had to throw something together at the last minute. Unlike Medjed in the last story arc, the month of September is written in a way that makes it clear Okumura is actually important to the story being told. The point of summer was not stopping Medjed, it was helping Futaba overcome her trauma and set her on the road to recovery. The point of September, on the other hand, is to put a stop to Okumura before he sells off his daughter to an abusive attempted rapist. While I can't tell you how I felt about the original version of the palace, I don't think the royal version of it is that bad. I would still say Kaneshiro is the low point, I just also wouldn't put Okumura that much higher. It sucks though, because I can tell there's a lot of potential with the entire month. However, Atlus failed at finding a way to blend these two story arcs together in a way that was satisfying, or at the very least didn't make me not want to work on this video. It sucks, but it's what we got, and we just have to deal with it. I'll see you guys next time with a story arc that is going to be way better than anything that just happened here. Hey, where did Ozzy go?
Okumura! 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 Okumura!